All right, guys, it's time for the fourth rendition of this series for the Green Bay Packers this offseason, going over 5 free agent targets at a specific position. We already did cornerback, linebacker, and edge. Today, we'll be flipping it over to the offense, and we'll be doing 5 free agent wide receiver targets I see as fits for the Green Bay Packers this offseason. We'll be doing a new episode every single week in positions of need for the Green Bay Packers, as there still are other positions of need for the Packers, such as defensive line, maybe interior offensive line, such as center, maybe even something like a tight end. So if this sort of video does interest you among everything else Green Bay Packers this offseason, I'd really appreciate it if you guys went down and clicked the subscribe button. A lot of the viewers that watch this channel don't even realize that they are not subscribed to the channel. It's free to do, and it helps out a ton. Thank you, guys. Quick reminder to go check out Sleeper and use code BASS at sign up to get $55 in free entries by simply making a $5 play. That's with code BASS. The link is down in the description. Although football season is officially over, you can still make your sleeper picks and have some fun for college basketball as well as the NBA. You can make your picks in tonight's Celtics versus Spurs game. Simply choose higher or lower on a multitude of players on a specific stat. They also offer free picks on multiple games tonight, both college and pro basketball for new users as well. So if you simply go make a $5 play, it really supports the channel, and you'll get $55 in free plays here on Sleeper. It's an awesome promo going around. Again, go use code BASS when signing up. Link down in the description. Big shout out to Sleeper. All right, so without further ado, let's get right back into the video. So we already went over cornerbacks in episode 1. Definitely a bigger need than wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. We went over edge defenders, which is also a big need for the Packers this offseason. We went over linebackers, which is somewhat of a need depending on how you look at the room and what they'll do with McDuffie and Eric Wilson. Now we're going to look at wide receiver, where I still think it's a need, but I don't think they necessarily need to go the free agent route. I think they just need to add someone into that room. Now that could be the draft, someone like Jaden Higgins in round 2, someone like Trey Harris in round 3, a guy that can beat man coverage, but they could very well add a guy, a renowned veteran in this free agency class to kind of pick up the slack for when Christian Watson is gone, and hopefully give the Packers a guy that can maybe beat man-on-man coverage, can be a quote-unquote number 1 guy until at least Christian Watson's back, or for the rest of the season. There are some options here in free agency, some veteran guys that can definitely come in and be a number 1 wide receiver for the Packers. And that's something we've been talking about so far this entire offseason. I think a lot of us can now agree that the Packers need to add someone into this wide receiver room. I was one that said, hey, they do not need to do that last offseason going into this past season, but things can change, right? 2024 happened. We saw what this wide receiver room is, and I'm not saying they don't have great potential or they can't grow to do great things, but I think right now this offense, what's holding them back is not having a true number 1 wide receiver. Of course, let me know what you think of that down in the comments below. Taking a look at the Packers' current wide receiver room, we've looked at this many times, so we'll quickly go over it. This is a regular season plus postseason stats. Jaden Reed was our leading receiver with 903 yards and 6 touchdowns, also led the team in drops. As for wide receivers, the second on this list, Christian Watson, 620 yards and 2 touchdowns, tore his ACL in week 18, won't be ready to at least week 12. Romeo Doubs, 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, had a couple concussions this season, was suspended by the Packers for a game for skipping out on practice. We have Tay Wicks, 454 yards and 5 touchdowns, struggled with drops early, right? I love the potential of Wicks. You guys know this, right? I think he can become a number one wide receiver, but is he going to do that in 2025? Right off the bat, I just don't know if that's going to happen. I think the Packers should go out and get a guy. I really do. After that, we have Bo Melton, 107 yards. He's an exclusive rights free agent, so he should be back. Malik Heath, 97 yards. So considering Watson will start the year on the PUP, even including Melton and Heath, that's still only 5 wide receivers. Now, the Packers, I'm almost guaranteeing will draft at least 1 wide receiver in this draft, considering Doubs and Watson are on the last year of their rookie deal. It's just what Brian Gutekunst does. But I wouldn't be shocked if they went and drafted a receiver and signed a free agent, right? And then that would bump one of Malik Heath or Bo Melton off the roster unless they kept 7, which is definitely something that could happen. The Packers also have enough money to go and make a couple moves in the free agency This offseason, the Packers have $44 million, and that's also including $18 million in dead cap from players that aren't on the team anymore. So the Packers cap situation just keeps getting better and better, and they're finally out of that hole where they're just kicking the can down the road. All right, so now let's move into the 5 free agent fits at wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. The first on this list, and these are in no particular order, I just want to get this one out of the way because we already made a separate video on it, and that is wide receiver T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals. Easily the number 1 free agent wide receiver in terms of talent, in terms of the money that's going to be paid. Now, of course, a lot of people have their own opinions on T. Higgins. A lot of people don't believe he is a true number 1 wide receiver, which I understand that mindset. He was under Jamar Chase, in Cincinnati, who was clearly their true number 1 wide receiver. So can he elevate himself to be a number 1 on another team? Also, are the Green Bay Packers going to shell out a lot of money for T. Higgins? I think if it was the right deal, I would not be mad at all if the Packers went out and signed T. Higgins. But I also feel, this offseason, the wide receiver market isn't that great in free agency. Another team's going to pay him a lot more money than maybe Brian Gutekunst is wanting to pay. Last year, an 88.2 overall grade. He had 104 targets, 73 receptions, 911 yards, 10 touchdowns, only 2 drops, 12.5 yards per reception, 3.1 yards after catch per reception, 125.1 passer rating when targeted, very high passer rating when targeted there, an average depth of target of 11.2. So T. Higgins is definitely an option. He's definitely the number 1 option in terms of, okay, you're bringing in a guy who's still 26 years old. You sign him to a 4-year deal. He's going to be your number 1 guy because you just paid him number 1 money for the next 4 years. And spot tracked his average annual salary, the calculated market value is $25.4 million annually. And I think a lot of people would look at this and go, that's an overpay, which I could see where you're coming from. When you compare it to other deals around the league, you have Brandon Ayuk got $30 million. Seems like an overpay, right? We have Amon St. Brown at $30 million. Is T. Higgins only $5 million less valuable than Amon St. Brown or someone like A.J. Brown at $32 million, right? So you kind of have to dictate that and say, can T. Higgins elevate himself to become an Amon St. Brown or an A.J. Brown of this team? And if that's a no, then yeah, you're probably overpaying for someone like T. Higgins at $25.4 million. He also does have some injury history with, I believe, his hamstring over the years. So that's something to take into effect. We know wide receivers with hamstring issues has been a problem for us with Christian Watson, at least. I think this is a lot of money for someone who technically hasn't been a true number 1 wide receiver, right? If you're on a team and you have Jamar Chase and you're the number 2 guy, yeah, you're going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. But what happens when you're the number 1 and there's a safety over the top consistently, right? Can you still win? Can you still gain separation? I think that's a lot of people's worry with T. Higgins, and I understand that argument. But if this number was a decent bit lower, say around the 20 to 21, I think I'm on board. But now that I think this has gone up since the last time I've even looked at it, I think this is very, very high. Of course, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below for T. Higgins. Next on this list is someone that not only may be cheaper than T. Higgins, but it's someone that you may actually get more production than T. Higgins, and that is Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, there's the same argument to be had with Chris Godwin, right? He has Mike Evans there. He's the number 2. He's coming off that pretty brutal ankle injury. I believe it was just a dislocation of the ankle rather than a break. I think it was week 7 against Baltimore that happened. We all saw the video. So he's recovering from that as well. But I think Chris Godwin's a guy, 28 years old. I think he's going to be 29 at the start of the season, where if you go out and sign him to a 2-year deal, this guy can contribute a lot to your wide receiver room and can be a true veteran, a true leader for all the guys under him, right? Be also a teacher, but not only just a teacher, but a guy that can be your number 1 guy. When healthy, Chris Godwin is a very, very talented wide receiver. Funny story about this guy. He actually grew up around my area, played high school ball around my area, and a lot of my friends played high school ball against him, and they're like, this guy was the best player they have ever played against, and he just absolutely destroyed their team. So that's another reason why I kind of want Chris Godwin here in Green Bay. Now that I've been taking a deeper dive into this wide receiver market free agency, I feel like Chris Godwin is just more of a realistic option because, like I said, I think teams are going to outbid the Packers for T. Higgins. So maybe Chris Godwin coming off this injury is much more of a realistic option for the Green Bay Packers. Now, we'll quickly look at his last season stats, but of course that was cut short after week 7 at 86.3 grade. He had 60 targets, 50 receptions, and that's impressive over 7 weeks, or not even because he, got hurt later in that game. 567 yards, 11.5 routes per reception, yards after catch per reception at 6.9, quarterback rating when targeted 127.5, average depth of target 5.6. We can move this back to 2023 and you can see his grades. We'll actually just look at mainly the stats here. 2023, 123 targets, 83 receptions. Both would be, the highest for Packers receivers this last season. 1,000 yards, same as that. Low touchdowns, but over 1,000 yards. In 2022, 1,000 yards. Actually, they had the same exact yardage. Okay, 1 yard different from 2023 to 2022, but over 100 receptions in 2022, 3 touchdowns, right? 2021, 1,100 yards, 98 receptions. 2020, 65 receptions, 840 yards. 2019, 1,300 yards. Getting farther back. Obviously, you're getting Chris Godwin at 29 years old after an ankle injury, but I still think he could be a true and trusted number 1 wide receiver for the Packers. And I feel like he fits the Packers scheme, kind of that, West Coast style type of offense, right? Run some dagger concepts where you're someone running, a deep route and Chris Godwin on a deep dig underneath, right over top the linebackers, underneath the safeties. I feel like that's where this guy's utilized the most. And the Packers run, dagger concepts a lot. And I feel like Chris Godwin, just a guy that could be your quarterback's best friend on third down, where, it's third down, you need a timing route to the outside, right at the sticks, and Chris Godwin's your guy there. So at this point, I feel like out of this list, and we still have 3 more names to go over, probably my favorite option. And if we go look at the calculated market value, I still think this is a bit high for a 29-year-old wide receiver coming off an injury. I don't think he's going to get this amount personally, $22.5 million annually. I mean, we see Stefon Diggs got that when he signed it at 30 years old with the Texans. We saw how that worked out. So I don't know if it's going to be applicable for his agent to go, well, look what Diggs got. Well, look what happened with Diggs, right? Mike Evans even got less than that when he signed when 30 years old. So if Mike Evans got less than that, I know it's a couple of years ago. I just don't know if Godwin's going to get 22.5. I know the market elevates. We have Brandon Cooks signed his at 28 years old, got 19 million. Calvin Ridley signed his at 29 years old, got 23 million. I feel like all these deals, you can look at them and go, well, it didn't really work out too well. So I could see it more so around that $19 to $20 million mark, which I'd be comfortable with. You give him a 1 year, 2 year deal, backload it a little bit, maybe put a void year, make his salary cap hit this season around $10 to $12 million. And then you have a true veteran, a guy that can elevate the rest of your guys in that room and really help this offense and help Jordan Love more importantly. The next receiver on this list is kind of a middle of the road option, right? We went over 2 receivers that are right around that $20 million mark or $20+ million mark. Now let's go over someone that's right around the 14, $15 million mark, and that is Amari Cooper, most recently with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, they traded for him from the Cleveland Browns and had an okay season with Buffalo. We'll see if they try to bring him back. He had 82 targets, 44 receptions. Of course, this is with 2 different teams, but 547 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. My best bet is the Bills just try to go younger here. And, I think the Packers could maybe go after someone like Amari Cooper if they don't want to spend that Chris Godwin, T. Higgins, $20 million type of money. Cooper only a couple years older than Chris Godwin, 30 years old, so that's why he's going to command less money there. But, go back to 2023, he was a 1,250-yard wide receiver. In 2022, over 1,100 yards. So it's still there. The talent's still there. He split between 2 different teams in 2024, and obviously that changes a lot. And I believe he had some injuries with the Bills as well. But 6'1", 211 pounds. We know Amari Cooper's been on a ton of different teams. Started with the Raiders, then to the Cowboys, then to the Browns, now with the Bills, a 5-time Pro Bowler there. He was 2-time top 100 via PFF. So Amari Cooper has the talent. He's another veteran guy that you could bring in and you know what you're getting, right? Like this guy, line him up out wide. He's your number 1 guy. He can elevate the rest of the guys, similar to Chris Godwin, but just be a veteran in the room. And I think the Packers are missing that right now. His calculated market value, like I said, a lot lower, $14.2 million. And they're comparing it to guys like Tyler Lockett when he signed his at 31 years old, $14.8 million. But then you see the same other 3 deals that we saw with Godwin. You see Stefon Diggs, Brandon Cooks, Mike Evans. I think this is a fair value for Amari Cooper, and you'd probably sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal maximum. And that's kind of all the Packers need right now because of Watson's injury, plus just getting a guy in the building. The next two players on this list are going to be cheaper options, but also solid receiver options, guys that can revitalize their career maybe for another team, maybe in Green Bay under Matt LaFleur, under Jordan Love. The first is Marquise or Hollywood Brown, most recently with the Kansas City Chiefs. A much shorter receiver than the Packers typically go for, but I feel like the Packers are starting to strive away from their traditional, values at certain positions, their metrics and what they require, height and weight for certain positions. And if they go away from that, maybe sign a cheaper free agent, deep threat receiver to replace Christian Watson for the meantime, Hollywood Brown's not a bad option if he can remain healthy. 27 years old, 5'9", 180 pounds. Obviously, this last season, he barely played with that shoulder injury for the Kansas City Chiefs. But, if he's fully healthy, add him into this Packers receiver room, he can take the top off a defense. He has a ton of speed. He can be your deep threat receiver. This last season, only 15 targets, 9 receptions, 91 yards. In 2023, he had 574 yards. That was with the Arizona Cardinals. He had 2 years in Arizona. Of course, drafted by the Ravens in 2019, had 2 years there. So he had 574 yards in Arizona, 709 yards the first year in Arizona. Going back to the Ravens, his rookie season, 584 yards. Sophomore season, 769 yards. And in 2021, his only season, he had over 1,000 yards. That's when he then left and went to the Arizona Cardinals. I believe that was a trade there. So his calculated market value is very low at $8 million. And that's because, it's been a very big unknown for Hollywood Brown this past couple of years. Really okay, what am I going to get with him if he's even going to be healthy? So you're kind of taking a shot here. It's definitely going to be a 1 year prove it deal for whatever team goes and signs him, but he's still 27 years old. So I think he's turning 28 at the start of the season. So if you go and take a flyer and take a shot on someone like Hollywood Brown, he could become, a solid wide receiver piece in that room with the absence of Christian Watson. They're comparing it to deals such as Robert Woods, Darnell Mooney, Mike Williams, and Kendrick Bourne. So I like the option if the Packers want to go a cheaper route, but get a guy in the building that can be a nice deep threat option. Another similar option, and very, very similar, just younger, and honestly probably a little bit more upside, is Tutu Atwell of the Los Angeles Rams. Also a very small wide receiver, 5'9", 165, 25 years old. But again, I feel like the Packers should kind of stray away from their metrics a little bit to go get some guys to help these positions of need. And this past season with the Rams, he had 61 targets, 42 receptions, 562 yards. Started the season very hot. I feel like earlier in the season, the Rams, Tutu Atwell was making some big plays in certain games. And he's another guy that has a ton of speed, can take the top off a defense. And again, not your traditional Packers wide receiver. Never really blew up in LA, right? 300 yards in 2022. In 2023, 500 yards. In 2024, almost 600 yards. But that's growth every single year. And again, he's only 25 years old and could be had for a very, very cheap contract. His calculated market value is $4 million, which is very, very cheap. I mean, you're basically just saying, hey, I'm going to sign this guy to a 1 year, 2 year deal, $4 million annually. It's a very low risk, high reward. You see, they're comparing him to someone like MVS, which honestly is an option. The Packers could bring back MVS for a 1 year deal to fill in for Christian Watson. That could happen. They're comparing him also to Darius Slayton. That's another option. He's another free agent. Mac Hollins, I believe he's also a free agent. But Tutu Atwell intrigues me. And I know, again, the Packers typically don't like these very small, very short wide receivers, but why not? I want something to kind of change. I'm almost tired of the Packers always sticking to their metrics. Okay, we need these tall, lanky receivers that run a 4.3, 4.4 40. I kind of want a different type of receiver in this building, and I think that's kind of what the Packers are missing. Like, sure, they could go get their T. Higgins, their Chris Godwin, their Amari Cooper, and just put them at number one, and that would be fine. That would be great. But also, I feel like not only through free agency, but it's the draft. I kind of want a receiver that's like shorter, lighter, right? A Devontae Smith type of receiver that's a great route runner, knows how to get open, can beat man coverage, right? And I think Tutu Atwell definitely can, due to the speed that he has, can take the top top of a defense. And that's why these final two are cheap options with Hollywood Brown, Tutu Atwell, guys that can definitely take the top off a defense, which the Packers are going to need without Watson. So those are the 5 options at wide receiver for this free agency for the Green Bay Packers. Again, it's a pretty light free agency in regards to wide receiver. In terms of like top guys that are young, it's just T. Higgins, and then there's a pretty big drop off, right? Because then the next couple of guys are pretty old, like Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, and then there's another drop off where you have young guys but unproven, right? Tutu Atwell, Hollywood Brown, maybe had some injuries in the past or didn't get their chance to shine, right? There's a ton of different options there. There's also other guys like I mentioned going over Tutu Atwell with MVS, Darius Slayton, Mac Hollins. There are definitely some other options that the Packers could be looking at, could be bringing back into the room, but these are the 5 that I see as fits for the Packers that maybe we hear their name talked about come free agency time. Let me know your favorite down in the comments below, these 5, or did I miss someone that you had your eyes on for the Green Bay Packers? I'm interested to hear your comments down below. I do appreciate you guys coming by to the channel. Hit the like on the video if you did enjoy it. I'll catch you on the next one, and as always, go Pack Go.